Representative, as you mentioned, we served in that bipartisan working group. And,
Absolutely.
And I know you're coming from a good place. I mean, you have a good heart, and we talked about this, and we share a lot of our concerns and values, as particularly as it pertains to allowing people of faith to be able to be part of the foster care system in terms of fostering children, and we are in total agreement on that.
Sure.
So let's just be clear there. But this does raise a lot of questions. This isn't an easy bill, really. It's a complicated bill. So I want to ask you just a couple of questions about it.
Absolutely.
On the this would be page 4, where get to the meat of it. That 4 lines 6 and 9, we're talking about this governmental entity may not discriminate against or take adverse action against a child or welfare services provider on the basis of wholly or partly that the provider, and this is the meat of it, I think, has declined or will decline to provide, facilitate, or refer to a person for child welfare services that conflict or under circumstances that conflict with the provider's sincerely held religious beliefs. So do you foresee any kind of limitation to that? In other words, you might have someone who has a very sincerely held religious belief that we shouldn't see a doctor. Right. Or a blood transfusion is something that we shouldn't do, or
it's a very
any
great
number.
question.
Any number.
Sure.
To some degree, depending, you could have a sincere religious belief that girls shouldn't get educated, shouldn't go to school. So how does this work within those?
Well, this only gives you, and we do have some experts that will testify on some of this in terms of exactly what it is. But let me just tell you. My understanding and belief of what it does. It only gives you the ability to not do something. So, for instance, one of the cases, and it's tragic, if let's say you have a 16-year-old you're fostering, they need an abortion or they want an abortion. Okay, obviously that could put a foster parent who doesn't believe that is something they want to participate in a bad situation. They would have the ability to call CPS, and then CPS would handle it as the state agency who is exempt from this. And they wouldn't be, their organization and themselves as a foster parent wouldn't be put in a position of being sued for not providing that service. All of this is superseded by the best interest of the child. You have to do that. But if somebody, for instance, was, let's say they didn't believe in vaccinations, they still have to communicate that with CPS. If you've been a foster parent, you communicate everything with CPS. Right. And CPS can still step in and provide that service and make reasonable accommodations for that. But it doesn't allow anything beyond that.
So if you mentioned vaccination, that's a good example.
Right. Yeah. I thought you had kind of sort of mentioned on that, or
not quite yet, but
or transfusions. I'm sorry. Yeah, you mentioned transfusions.
Yeah, you do have people that, I don't know if it's necessarily a religious belief, but they do have a strong belief.
That's why it was important that there was nothing that changed the best interest of the child. That's why we were saying the best interest of the child supersedes that. I mean, that has to be done, and that's why also the SSCCs are included as the government entity as well for that. So you have that overarching protection.
Okay, so let's go back to vaccination. So I have a sincere religious belief it's against my religion, right? And I sincerely believe that. Sure. And I foster a child, and so CPS could make me provide the vaccines, or no?
Well, I mean, the way that would, and I anticipate working, and by the way, we'll have, DFPS is here, and you can ask that specific question, because, this is a bill that's not in force yet, so how it's going to be implemented in the field will be up to them. But the way I would assume it would work, you would call and say, this is something that the doctor is saying that we need to do, but I'm not comfortable doing it for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Would you do that? Because CPS does that all the time. I mean, there are accommodations made for foster parents, whether they're working, get sick. I mean, there's accommodations made all the time. All we're asking is for reasonable accommodations. Yeah.
Well, and if
does that answer your question?
I think it does. I think it leaves a lot open to how the agency might do this, which I think with a bill like this, there's a lot of scenarios that aren't just hypothetical, that really could happen. Yeah. That I think maybe could be addressed here.
And really the main thing that we're trying to address at the end of the day to keep foster care providers out there is we're trying to give some protections to lawsuits that have nothing to do with the questions that you're asking about the safety of the child. They have to do with organizations being targeted for not agreeing with certain things. They are being targeted and sued by people who are not providing foster care. That's really what we're trying to do. We're not. We're not trying to
What would
open.
they be sued for? I mean, just
Well,
give
I
me
mean,
an
the
example.
two that have been the biggest issues are the abortion issue, and some of that is sued for damages. Some is just not included in government programs if you're not willing to do that. And the second is same-sex couples. Is you go in and ask, Catholic Charities, Buckner's, any of a number of places that are out there, and you ask for training. Now, I mean, the reality is I'm not sure why they would, because it's about 25% of the places do training. There's plenty of places that LGBT couples can go. But basically, if, let's say, you go to Catholic Charities to target them and then you sue them for not training the same-sex couple, which, by the way, they also don't train, and each one has their own guidelines. They also don't train unmarried couples. So theoretically, you could have an unmarried couple sue for them not training. That just that's not happening, but that would be one of the protections that I believe would exist in the bill.
So how would this work? Let's say the child is gay, right?
Yep.
And say you mentioned Catholic Charities, and that's why I'm just going to say
Sure,
it.
sure,
Say
that's
Catholic
fine.
Charities as well. We don't want to place a gay child. Is that something?
Well, that's not happening, because almost all these are they are willing to take any child. Okay, and again, and that it's a great question that my layout was already long enough. I was going to kind of lay out the way foster care works, but the CPS, when they place a child, they are supposed to place them taking into consideration a litany of things, but all of it under the heading of the best interest of the child. So you wouldn't likely place an LGBT kid in the home of a devout Baptist, Catholic, whatever, if that wasn't something you discussed with them. Nor would you, if you happen to have a child coming out of a devout Catholic, place him in the home of somebody who didn't go to church. That's not discrimination. That's the responsibility of CPS to place the child in an area that they are going to be best suited for, which is why we need providers of all stripes. Mm-hmm. We need Catholic homes, we need LGBT homes, we need all those homes. We actually need to work together, but we don't all have to think the same.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of witnesses, and I don't. So that's fine.
So let me shut up.
No. Well,
no, I mean,
no.
I didn't mean that.
No, it's fine. What I'm saying, I know you and I agree completely, and I think everybody on the 10-member bipartisan working group agree that people of faith shouldn't feel like they can't be part of this. I mean, the more the better. Is we all agree on that, I guess.
Right, and I think it's I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. But the one thing I was going to say, I think the only difference is, I think if you have certain providers, if they want to be part of, the process, they want to be, place foster kids or be foster families or whatever. I don't understand why we have to do a carve out. Why can't they just play by the rules like everybody else? Because I know there's willing people of faith that want to do this, and so I don't know if the fear of getting sued, if that's going to be the.
Well, it's not just the fear of getting sued; it's the very real getting sued. I mean, it's the getting sued. And again, the most frustrating thing: this is not sued by people who are trying to get in the foster care system and want to.
But how many lawsuits are we talking? How many?
Well, we'll have some of the providers talk about the lawsuits and the dollars and the number of people that are no longer being able to foster because of it. And it's really it's people who are not in the business of foster care suing those that are over something that has nothing to do with the kid. And that's what we're trying to prevent, I believe.
All right. Thank you.